I just keep going back to the same sort of admittedly simplistic point about this as people talk about the different reasons why you'd want Chris Paul. Yesterday, I gave you two reasons. One of them was what I will admit, I'm just not a fan of the guy.
Right.
And so I'm allowed as a Warrior fan to just be like, no, I just don't want him because I don't enjoy watching Chris Paul play basketball.
That's how I felt about DeMarcus Cousins.
And that's fine, right? But my quicker and more basketball level point here is I don't think this person is as good at basketball anymore as many of you think he is. I think you all think you're getting a version of, you're going to get Chris Paul. You're just only going to get him for 23 minutes a game. And I'm like, you guys all know that he's not Chris Paul anymore. That's his name.
He's CP 2.5, and I stand behind that.
If
you look at his numbers last year, and
I don't think so.
I didn't exactly watch every single one of his games. I watched a ton of Phoenix basketball, and Chris Paul is not peak Chris Paul. But if I imagine a Chris Paul on this team, last year he played 30 minutes a night. If he plays between 20 and 25 minutes a night over the course of 60 games, last year he played 59, and he averaged about 9 assists a game. Could he come here in this offense and be good enough to be your backup point guard? Would he be better than Ty Jerome or Anthony Lamb on this team?
Well,
absolutely.
I don't know why we would compare him to Anthony Lamb, and I don't think any of us think backup point guard is the number one issue on the team. And yes, there's a premise there of, is Jordan Poole still on the team or not?
Right.
And none of us know that right now. So you can factor all of that in. I would warn against falling in love with his basketball reference page, because you've brought up stats a couple of times, and I could quickly retort and go, well, Jordan Poole could walk around, and in another market, maybe they're talking about acquiring Jordan Poole, and there's two guys, call them Don and Matt. Matt and Don have a radio show, and they're sitting there going, Don, he averaged 20 points a game last year. And we're sitting here having watched all the games, and we're like, yeah, that doesn't tell the story. I know Jordan Poole averaged 20 points a game. You tell me, was he good?
At times, he was unbelievable.
At times. How about all the other times? Was he good? Was he better than he was the year before? Did you enjoy watching him? Do you think he helped the Warriors go further as opposed to not quite as far? If I pose all that to a Warrior audience, I think most of you would have an answer that was less than positive. And I'd say the same thing about Chris Paul with the Phoenix Suns. You can give me, but he had 14 and 9. Right, he did. He's out there a lot. He's got the ball in his hands a lot. He's going to record a lot of stats. He's not a horrible basketball player. He's nowhere near what he used to be. And I mean light years away.
From when, though? Like, how far back do you want to go? Do you want to go to peak Chris Paul? Then I don't know if you could say light years away.
I even think 2 years ago.
I think that you're wrong. I disagree with you.
Okay.
And, I think that he's definitely deteriorated, and in the role that he's been playing with Phoenix, it's probably more taxing to him than he can handle, and that's why he's gotten hurt seemingly every year in the postseason. He breaks down. I think in this load management team with Rick Celebrini, the great strength and conditioning guru, a guy who knows how to nurture a veteran player's body better than maybe anybody in the association. I look at Chris Paul in a playoff series, if he's able to be healthy, and I know that's a big if, he would be a huge asset for a team that this year struggled because of a lack of experience.
Well,
that's why the Warriors struggled in the postseason.
I mean, we're also at a point where it seems laughable to think he would even be available in the playoffs, because he never is. Now, if he were to play a bunch less minutes, maybe he would be this time around. Here's another thing that I've heard, though, on this Chris Paul conversation, and I want to be very careful to point out, this is not you. I don't think you're one of these folks.
Okay.
But I do think some of the pro-Chris Paul conversation comes from this. Some of you think Chris Paul to the Warriors is not actually your opinion. It's kind of your snarky retort. Here's what I mean by that. There's obviously been a young versus old conversation with this Warrior group going on for a long time now. And if you are on the side of what's being called run it back, I love Steph, Clay, and Dre, and I'm very much there. So I'm now being called anti-young. I hate young players, apparently.
You hate the young people.
So, which is absurd, but that's fine. In this debate, if you are like, get Draymond out of here, it's time to move forward, there are plenty of Warrior fans there. I think those folks are angry at the opposite opinion, which is, no, they're not declining. Stick with Steph, Clay, Dre. Stick with Steph, Clay, Dre. And so pro-young people or young players are going, okay, fine. You want 35-year-olds? Then
he's 38.
Chris Paul. So we should get Chris Paul. I think I hear some of that.
Yeah.
Where it's like,
and
you
that's
don't,
not me.
I know.
That's not me.
It's very
and
clearly
I'm glad
not.
that you pointed out that that's not me.
But I've heard that where, and again, that's me reading it where it's like, okay, if we're just going to do this, if we're just going to give Wiseman, Kuminga, and Poole away for GP2 and a pack of Trulies, well, let's get Chris Paul. And so there's almost like a sarcasm behind some of the opinions I've heard.
I get that,
Yeah.
and I look at it a little bit differently, and I look at it two ways. For one, if we are going to move off of Jordan Poole, and I say we as the Golden State Warriors, thank you, if they're going to trade Jordan Poole and you're going to bring back some pieces, if you do trade Jordan Poole, I think you and I can both agree that they won't trade Jordan Poole for draft assets or for players younger than Jordan Poole.
I hope not.
I would imagine if you trade Jordan Poole, it's going to be for somebody like OG Anunoby, who is around 30. Chris Boucher is around 30. You're going to bring in veteran pieces because you're trading Jordan Poole for players who can help you right now. The other piece of this, Mark, for me, is that this Golden State Warrior coaching staff doesn't seem to be that enthusiastic about playing younger players. You've got PBJ, Ryan Rollins, who got hurt, but before that, he didn't play much. Kuminga struggled to get any playing time. Wiseman was mostly unplayable, according to the Warriors coaching staff, and I kind of agree with them. So if you are going to run it back with Steph, Clay, and Dre, and Wiggins and Kevon Looney, neither of whom is 30 years old, but they're both veterans in this league, then surround them with more veterans. And if Chris Paul's getting 15 or 16 million from Phoenix, which would be the buyout amount that he would get, he doesn't have to go out and get a huge contract. If he's willing to sublimate his ego and chase a chip and be a 20 to 25 minute player, which I believe is what he is now. He played 30 a game last year, over 60 games, 59 games. As I mentioned, he played 50 fewer minutes than Steph Curry. So it's not like he was unavailable for the majority of the regular season. If Chris Paul wants to go somewhere, sublimate his ego, and chase a championship, this would be a great spot. They would love to have a veteran point guard come off the bench.
I think a huge if, number one, that you display there.
And I don't know Chris Paul.
Of course. No.
None of us do.
No, but we know people who know Chris Paul. So
and I hated that I outed your guy who knows a guy.
No,
that was
not
wrong
my
with
guy.
me.
I know a lot of people in Phoenix.
You sure do.
There's millions of people down there in that area. So, by the way, OG Anunoby is only 25. I do want to throw that out there because I think it's important to this conversation.
How many years in for OG? 6 already, or
OG?
Because that to me is as important as his relative age.
Anunoby,
and he is younger than even I thought.
Scrolling.
Plays, yeah.
He's played 368 career games
in the regular season, so that means he's 5 years in. Because nobody plays 82 anymore.
He started at age 20. Yes, he has played 6 seasons in the NBA.
Okay.
He's age 25.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so.
Just one real quick as we're talking about numbers. Jordan Poole was 15th to worst in field goal percentage in the association among qualifying players.
Right. So, that's why I don't want to just look at Basketball Reference and go, Chris Paul was 14-9, therefore he's good. It doesn't mean that, in my opinion.
4th in the league in assists per game.
Great. Sweet, yeah. I mean, he's got really good offensive players that he's passing to, and he's got the ball in his hands for 37 minutes a night.
And he would have that same thing here. Really good offensive players to whom to throw the basketball.
Except for actually no, because we're asking him to run Unit 2. So he now
Which includes Klay Thompson.
Maybe. It
Usually.
might, right. Although
Usually Clay goes out and then,
Usually, yeah, it might be Wiggins. Although I've heard a lot of people tell me that Klay Thompson can't play basketball anymore in the last few weeks. So here's what I'm saying. When people are pro idea of veterans, that's like what you just said, sort of like is what I mean by again, not you, but the sarcasm of, okay, we need vets, let's get Chris Paul. Holy hell, there are different kinds of vets. Getting veterans. Anunoby's a veteran. He's 25.
Right.
Andrew Wiggins is a veteran.
He's 27.
He's 27.
Yeah.
I don't need 38. That's not what I mean. The Warriors don't need to. Even I, sitting here saying that Steph, Clay, and Dre, the decline has been overstated. Even I don't want 38-year-olds. That's not who's going to come fix the Warriors. Yeah, he's experienced. You can find experience that's not old, is what I'm saying.
Well, I don't think that he is old, honestly.
Chris Paul?
A guy who plays NBA 32 old. Minutes a game is not NBA old.
And breaks down.
Well, if he was a Warrior, if he was a Warriors, he wouldn't play that many minutes in that frequency. He was playing for an organization that misused his body. And yes, he's an older player. I'm not saying, and to me, what you're talking about, the snark, is what Guru threw out, saying, bring in Dwight Howard and DeMarcus Cousins. And Carmelo Anthony while we're at it. That, to me, is the snark part of this conversation.
Let's get Jordan. What the hell?
Michael? Or
DeAndre?
DeAndre. I was going to say DeAnthony. I knew that was wrong.
Is Isaiah Thomas available?
Which
because
one?
You need a good
How
point.
about both of them?
Both of them. They can both back up Steph Curry.
That, to me, is snark. Talking about a 37-year-old who's now 38, who played 32 minutes a night, that's not snark.
But I just don't think he didn't do it well. I'm telling you, man, this guy is more trouble than he's worth. The idea that Chris Paul, at age 38, is going to suddenly, overnight, he's a starting point guard for the 4-seed Phoenix Suns, okay? And a guy who's got a 2-year, $60 million contract currently on the table. The idea that overnight, bang, he gets hurt, he's out of the playoffs, and overnight, he suddenly decided, you know what? I am now a bench player. I now am no longer needed as a voice in the locker room. I am just going to go somewhere and be their sixth option and just hang out at about 17 minutes a game. Now, could you be right? Sure, you could be. That feels far-fetched to me that Chris is thinking that for what's next in his career.
Life comes at you fast, bro.
It sure does.
And he's at a spot now where he's got a fork in the road if he leaves Phoenix. One fork is continue to play as much as you want and be a starting point guard for a team that maybe isn't as competitive for a chip, or sublimate the ego, take a big swallow, and go somewhere where you can win and maybe be a 7th or 8th man. He has that choice to make.
Yeah. And again, you read those odds, and the Warriors, it felt like, were maybe somewhere in the neighborhood of 10th.
7th or 8th, right in there.
On the list.
Lakers were number 1.
The Lakers are always number 1.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who's available. The Lakers are number 1.
If you're Chris Paul, would you rather go play with LeBron, Anthony Davis, and a whole bunch of who knows, or come to Golden State and be a bench player? That, to me, is an interesting question, and that will speak to what he really wants to do.
I'd rather go to the Lakers. If I put myself in his position, he's lived there before for a good portion of his life.
Yeah.
That's the seemingly people who love to do commercials on the side. It's a perfect place to be. He's got his banana boat buddy, and he probably always wanted to put the uniform on all the way back to the day where he thought he was about to put the uniform on, and then David Stern pulled it back. That's what I would want to do. I want to go be some Steph Curry afterthought after the Warriors have been my rival on and off for my whole career. I don't know. Seems far-fetched.